Hi everyone! Welcome to episode 2 of What I See by VUni Research Club. Today we are more than lucky to have our guest speakers from South Africa, UKZN, Nelson Mandela School of Medicine. I would like to introduce Mr. Mohamed and Mr. Saien. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audiences?
Sure, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to thank you and the team from the Research Club for this invitation, for inviting us for this podcast. My name is Mohamed Hoosen Suleman. I'm a final year medical student in South Africa, and I'm a research intern. I'm a research placement for CAPRISA, which is the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa. I'm deeply honored, I'm deeply privileged to be here, to be at Viện University and to have a discussion with you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Saien?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Saien Govender. I'm a fifth year medical student from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm also, like Mohamed, a CAPRISA Research Placement Program mentee. And I'm from a province called KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and a small town called Pinetown. So that's where I'm from. Yeah, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys and you and the team for organizing. Yep.
So, without no longer wait, I would like to begin our session today. Firstly, how do you feel about your stay in Vietnam?
I think it's absolutely wonderful. For us, it's quite delightful. Being part of this exchange program, it's a partnership between CAPRISA and Viện University. We're here for 2 weeks, and just over 1 week we're being here. And I think our stay has been truly wonderful. The hospitality, our colleagues, the students, and the faculty itself, the College of Health Sciences and the leadership, they have been so accommodating, so welcoming. We arrived on Sunday. On Sunday last week, we were received by the College of Health Sciences at the airport. We were also received by the embassy, the South African embassy in Vietnam, and it has been truly wonderful. I think we will really miss this place when we go back to South Africa, and we will be impatient, to come back here and to be with all of you.
So my experience, I've thoroughly enjoyed the experience from the time we arrived. The support we've received from the students, from the staff at Viện Uni has been immense. And I feel really privileged to have the opportunity to come here. It's my first time overseas. And I feel like the experience, it's one I'll never forget. And hoping to make more memories. We have a few more days left, and I'm really thankful for this opportunity.
I am happy that you all enjoy your experience in Vietnam, and we are all impressed by the amount of research you have published while still being students. What do you think has taken you to this stage of achievement? Has it been careful planning, good concentration, or consistent efforts in doing research?
Well, I think it's the influence, the support, the motivation, the inspiration from our mentor, Professor Salim Abdul Karim, who you'd know is the director of CAPRISA. He's a renowned a scientist in the field of HIV that has not only been recognized in South Africa, but globally. He is also the special advisor to the Director General for the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros. And I think the influence and the support, the inspiration that we receive from him has probably sparked our interest in research, to be involved in global health, to take an interest in public health, to understand the disease profile of the community that we come from, and of course to be involved in research, to contribute to the body of knowledge of infectious diseases, and especially HIV and AIDS, TB, more recently COVID-19. And I think as a medical student, it's a privilege for us that we are afforded this opportunity to understand the physiology of the body. Understanding how the body works then affords you that appreciation, that gratitude for the blessing of this body that the Almighty has provided for us. So I think essentially that interest has been sparked by our mentor, and of course the other teachers that we have in South Africa. So for me personally, it has been a wonderful journey. My journey probably dates back to 2019 as a first-year medical student and interacting with Professor Abdul Karim in his office at Caprisa. And you know, my first interaction with him has been truly profound, wherein what's supposed to be a 20-second meet and greet with him had actually turned into a 20-minute robust engagement about HIV and AIDS. And so since then, this journey has now evolved, has developed, and I'm quite excited, you know, for the years to come. Yeah.
Okay, so my research journey is quite similar in the sense of how we started. I joined the Caprisa Research Placement Program in first year of study, and since then I've been allocated a great mentor who's helped me with research, given me opportunities to do research, and she's been really supportive. So Dr. Tanuja Gengia from Caprisa, who's the head of pharmacy. So since then I've been involved in various projects, and just end of last year we managed to publish an article. So that was one of my goals in research, is to actually be published one day, and I was so excited to actually publish my first article together with my fellow researchers. And I've been able to work with amazing students such as Mohamed. We've also been doing research together, and I feel like research is a way to not only expand your knowledge, but also learn so much from different people. And I just like to talk about the opportunity of collaboration with Vietnam, Vinh Uni. We are currently doing a study on Candida auris with one of the final year nursing students, and Professor Andrew Taylor Robinson from Vinh Uni. So I'd just like to highlight that research can cross borders, and the importance of collaboration between different countries. And yeah, so that's where I'm at in terms of research. Yeah.
Thank you for your intriguing sharing. I think that the key to achievement in research are firstly the interest in your topics, the undying motivation, and also good mentorship from your sharing. And can you share one of the most memorable moments you had while doing your research?
For me, I think it was quite a number. It's not just one, but perhaps I'll draw attention to maybe two. This was being at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, being invited as a medical youth delegate to be representing the youth voice globally, but from a South African perspective, and to be interacting with these experts on global health. My most recent interaction was in May of last year, being at the WHO headquarters, and this was a meeting about smoking cessation. What interventions can be implemented, can be adopted, that will form part of global health policy that will reduce smoking and the associated risks. And this is now a meeting, and I'm probably the youngest in the room, and I just lift my hand up to say, I want to intervene. I have input to make into the meeting. And the chair of the meeting was Dr. Rudiger Kretsch, who is the director for health promotion at the World Health Organization. And I just pitched an idea about smoking cessation, the use of QR code, in that if you are a smoker, you ought to declare to public health authorities, because smoking is a public health risk. Each smoker will then be assigned a QR code, You go to the local supermarket to purchase a pack of cigarettes, they will scan that code, and you are limited in terms of your purchase. And then the intervention goes on. But prior to pitching that idea, I was somewhat reluctant. How will I be viewed? Because I'm probably still young, and the perception is that, what do you know, you are still young. But then how it is received on the other side, you know, we must never take for granted the power and the effectiveness of the voice we have, especially as young people being involved in policy, in decision making. We should never take for granted these opportunities. And I think as part of another memorable an opportunity or perhaps research was an intervention I worked on for antimicrobial resistance. This was in 2019. We were using mobile health intervention to improve patient compliance to antimicrobial medication. And we found that in South Africa, I think in the province of KZN, over 47% of people were reporting non-compliance, hence the need to intervene. This intervention was shortlisted as the top 10 interventions globally to address antimicrobial resistance. We presented to WHO in Geneva in 2019. In my career in the last 5 to 6 years, these probably stand out as the memorable moments, if you like. And I think these are opportunities that I will forever cherish. And I hope it will serve as a means, as a motivation for me to continue in this path, to continue in this kind of trajectory. I'm just reminded of a quote: you are rewarded in public for what you practice for many years in private. And I think for the listeners, for the viewers out there, you ought to take this into consideration, that indeed you are rewarded for your efforts.
Thank you. That was really inspiring. And I would like to also hear from Mr. Saien.
Okay, so I think there are quite a few memorable experiences while doing research, but I think the one that stands out for me would be getting published for the first time. And it's like all your hard work throughout the whole research process, from coming up with a research topic to creating a proposal, applying for ethics, and then doing data collection, data analysis, coming up with a manuscript, a research article, and then submitting to a journal. So I found that it's an incredibly long, tedious process where you'll find that you're going to be rejected by certain journals. It's part of the process. And you make changes, some will reject it completely, then you submit to another journal. But in that whole process, you grow as a person, you learn to take criticism. And in that sense, at the end of all of that, you'll be published, and all of that hard work, you'll find that it's worth it in the end. So I think that's the most memorable moment for me in research. And of course, like interacting with different people, all the students, our mentors, and learning so much from them, having Zoom meetings in person. I think all of that, I have flashbacks of that now, and I think those were all memorable experiences and have helped me to get where I'm at now. Yeah.
Thank you. Your sharing truly took us on, we can imagine your journey, and doing research takes time and enormous effort.
Yeah.
But in the end, like Mr. Mohamed has said, we all try hard and work hard in private so that we can shine in the public at the end. So next up, which project are you currently working on? We would like to hear some details about it.
Sure. So I think the most recent project that we've just concluded actually together was on the knowledge, attitude and practices of the final year nursing students of the institution we come from, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, what is their understanding about vaccines. And we've actually just concluded the project. We've done the write-up, interpreted the results, the analysis, we've submitted, and we've been accepted for publication. And I think this was what had inspired the start of the study. The objective and the aim is that when we look at the COVID-19 pandemic, we find that when the vaccination programs were being rolled out, our nurses were that first point of contact. They were on the front line to be administering these vaccines. And then it becomes important that our nurses have adequate knowledge about vaccines, because the lay public will present themselves to the vaccination sites, and of course they will have questions. They will pose those questions to the nurses who are on the front line. And we felt that we should assess the knowledge, try to intervene, because once you identify the knowledge gap, you will then intervene to fill in and to make changes to the curriculum. So that was our most recent project. And I think for me personally, it's a total of 24 research projects, some of which have been completed. They have been submitted to the various international journals. Some of them have been accepted pending revisions, and of course the others still need to be refined, to be worked on. But I find that when embarking on these projects, because as a medical student you'll find that time is always the limiting factor. You're not just involved into one research endeavor. There's a whole host of projects that you're working on concurrently. And then it becomes important to be managing your time. I've also started a new project that is making a curriculum for ultrasound globally. I'm part of a small working group for the International Federation of the Medical Students Association, which of course is in official relations with the World Health Organization. We will soon be starting that particular project, and we hope to conclude it by June or July of this year. Some of the other interventions that I am working on is on antimicrobial resistance. I'm also working on an education campaign. I find that when it comes to AMR, to antimicrobial resistance as we know it, our knowledge is quite limited on this particular topic. And perhaps for this reason, we tend to shy away from the topic. Such a critical and an important part that should make up, our clinical, that our clinical ward round, we should actually include antimicrobial stewardship as we do our ward rounds. Our consultants ought to be teaching the juniors about antimicrobial awareness and antimicrobial stewardship, as we call it, which, by the way, ties in with the initiatives of the World Health Organization. And if you will allow me, and if time permits, so the United Nations has published research on antimicrobial resistance, and they have projected that by 2050, if left unabated, more than 10 million lives per year could be lost. It could cost the global economy in excess of $2 trillion. And I think it's important that we initiate a discussion. Each year, the third week of November, we celebrate what we called World Antibiotic Awareness Week. That entire week has been assigned for the global health community come together, do awareness campaigns, do education campaigns about antimicrobial resistance. And for me, these are just some of the projects, that I have embarked on. And I hope that they will reach its ultimate goal. And in the end, in some small way, if I can make a contribution to improve health outcomes, to improve the state of health in the community, the country where I come from, to be making some contribution to health policy. I think it's important that youth ought to be included, in these decision-making processes. We often say that young people, or it's the new ideas, the fresh blood, that can come into, because you can't address existing health problems with the same solutions. You ought to bring something novel and something innovative. So these are just some of the projects, the initiatives that I'm working on.
Okay, so the project I'm currently working on is a study, CAP study, knowledge, attitudes and practices, on Candida auris fungemia. So we targeting ICU staff members, and we trying to see how much knowledge they have about the infection, the attitudes towards infection prevention and control, and the practices of IPC as well. And it's currently we in the data collection phase of the study, and I'm working with, as I mentioned, who is a fourth-year medical nursing student at Uni, and Professor Andrew Taylor Robinson from immunology. So at the moment we still getting responses from the ICU staff, the doctors and the nurses. So I feel like in most research projects, data collection is quite a challenge, because you aiming for a high response rate, and currently we have to be patient and give it a little bit more time so we can reach our target response rate. And so a little bit more about Candida auris. It's a highly resistant fungus that's quite spread quite commonly now in USA and globally. So with Candida auris, it's resistant to your antifungals, so a few of your antifungal classes, and it makes it difficult to treat. And hence, the idea behind our studies, we want to try and find out if there were an outbreak, because currently in the hospital that we are researching in, there hasn't been an outbreak. Would the staff be prepared enough to control and handle the outbreak? So that's the idea behind the study, and once the study is done, we would like to come up with the standard operating procedure and guidelines on how to manage an outbreak. So that's the idea behind the study. Yeah, so that's the current project I'm working on, and excited to see how if we can complete it. Yeah.
I can see you two are both really active in doing research, and I can also see your unceasing efforts and commitment to create a better world for everyone, especially in healthcare. Upon our observations, we have also found that many students struggle in doing research because of several problems. Herewith, we would like to go through them to address these issues and ask for your suggestions of the solution. The first concern of many students is how to find a research topic. We all know that devoting oneself to research requires a lot of time and effort. Hence, many are hesitant to throw him or herself in any topic with fear that they may lose interest in the topic or have to give up because the result is not what they have expected. What do you think students should do to choose an appropriate research topic or to overcome the aforementioned fear?
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful question and an important one, because I often find with the students, that's where it all begins, to identify a research topic to work on. And I think a lot of the questions that come about from the students when they express interest about research, about being involved in these kinds of discussions, where do I start? Who do I approach? What do I approach them on? And I think it's important that as a medical student, as an early career researcher, you ought to identify what interests you. Am I interested in HIV? Am I interested in TB? Am I interested in hypertension, diabetes, cancer? Am I interested in child health pediatrics? Am I interested in surgery? That's if you're in the health sciences space. In the broader scheme of things, if you are a student, I'm a law student, okay, which aspect of the law am I interested in? I'm an accounting student. My dream and aspiration is to become a chartered accountant. You ought to identify clearly what interests me, where am I going, where do I see myself in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years. I'm interested in engineering, you know, which part of engineering am I interested in? Is it the mechanical or the chemical, electrical, and so forth? Once you identify that particular area of interest, and so for example, if we look at the health space, which we are quite familiar with, if you are passionate about public health, you ought to then identify who do you see as a mentor in public health. And I think that just a little bit, just a little of research in the institution you come from, who has distinguished themselves in that particular field. And I found that for me, what interests me was public health, was epidemiology, was HIV. And then to identify who has distinguished themselves in that field, for me, it was Professor Abdul Karim. I was also inspired by our medical school dean, where we come from, Professor Dlova. She has been truly remarkable in terms of research in dermatology. And in 2019, she had led the team to a breakthrough study that actually identified the gene for central centrifugal alopecia. This is a gene that causes hair loss in African women, and for me, I was inspired by that. I then arranged a meeting with her, and from there we also have about 4 research projects that looks at alopecia in African women, trying to identify the normal afro-textured hair for African women, in particular students. So I think that when students want to identify a research topic, what really interests you? What do you think you can contribute? Where do you think is a gap, you know, in the knowledge, in the research, in the literature? For example, as part of the different projects I'm involved in, I've identified antimicrobial resistance as an issue, as an area, as a focus area that needs intervention, that needs work to be done. And then you involve yourself with experts. For example, in AMR, Professor Sabiha Isaac, who is the former Dean of Health Sciences at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, I'm truly inspired by her efforts in research. So essentially, when you identify that kind of focus area, you need to then approach who has achieved, you know, that highest level of academic excellence, who is an expert, who is a renowned expert in that particular field. From the university we come from, there's no particular program that seeks to link up a student with a mentor, and therefore you take it upon yourself to approach those kinds of teachers, to request to be under their tutelage, their mentorship, to be learning under their wing. From the university that we come from, we have experts who are globally renowned, whose work in research has received applause globally. And I think really it would be a disservice to ourselves should we not take advantage of that particular opportunity. And I always tell the students, you know, from the little interaction that I have, those whom I speak with, those whom I network with, is that don't limit yourself. You know, your potential is unlimited. And when you identify that area of research, you then need to put all efforts to be working, of course, under the guidance, under the leadership, the mentorship of these experts. And I think that, you know, at Caprisa, they had taken 18 years of failure prior to seeing one success. So you can imagine that if you fail and fail, keep going, you know, because eventually the success is what will be guaranteed. And I mean, I think in the course of our discussion, I'll share with you a formula that I call CP3. It's an acronym, or CP cubed if you like. And so it's something that I've created upon that first interaction I had with Professor Abdul Karim, and I'd be happy to share it with you. And I often share it when I speak, you know, in interviews, both in South Africa and in other platforms, and in an effort to inspire students, youth, insofar as what can they do, you know, to achieve success to some extent in all types of initiatives.
So in terms of advice for students, from my perspective, I think you need to, as Mohamed said, find what interests you. Whether you come across a topic in class, during a lecture, or you find that one of the professors has inspired you on a certain topic. And I think, yeah, you need to approach them, whether it be your lecturer, a researcher, a fellow student that's been involved in research. Find out more from them, how you can get started, especially for those students coming from high school who don't have a background in research. It can be difficult to know how to start. And I think the importance of a mentor should be highlighted here. So the earlier you make contact with a mentor, whether you can email a professor, a fellow researcher, and make a set or schedule a meeting with them. It can be over Zoom, it can be in person. And before the meeting, make sure you read up on a certain topic that you're interested in. And I think the importance of also a literature review, read up on articles around that topic, so you have an idea of what work has already been published, what work has already been done on that specific topic. Then you approach a researcher, a lecturer, who can be your mentor, you know. And I feel that having a mentor, from my experience, has really helped guide me on the right path. And yeah, so I feel that would be my advice. From my experience, in terms of what topic you can be interested in, from my experience, I was in the hospital doing a ward round with the infectious disease team. And during that ward round, the consultant mentioned Candida auris, and I was like, wow. I was curious to know, you know, what is this? What is this organism? I've never heard of it before. I know about Candida albicans, which is common, but I never heard of Candida auris. And then I went home. I searched on Google, and it turns out it's quite a global threat in terms of fungal pathogens. On the World Health Organization, it's the second priority pathogen, fungal pathogen on the WHO priority pathogen list. So that really inspired me to actually, you know, do some research on it. And we've come up with the CAP study. And I'd just like to highlight the importance of wherever you are, whether it be in the classroom, in the hospital, you know, you can be inspired by your environment, anyone or anything, and you need to, you know, don't let that interest go to waste. You know, go home and read up about it, and it's from there you keep the ball rolling. You find a mentor, and you start the research process. And as you go along, I know it can be difficult to continue with the research. At some stages it becomes difficult. But as Mohamed says, at the end of the whole process, you know, it becomes worth it. All that hard work and perseverance, in the end, it's definitely worth it. And you are contributing to the whole research community. Yeah.
So I think the most important thing we need to do in order to find a research topic are gaining insights. Like insights from firstly yourself and then from mentor, because you do not always know what the files may have in it, and you can seek for advice from people who have been there more than you. But I think it all starts from curiosity, like Mr. Saien has said. Next up, the second matter is that we all know students, especially healthcare students, could find it really hard to make time for doing research due to their tight schedule and enormous amount of knowledge they have to obtain. However, we have experts here. I know that you two are excellent students in your school in both research and academic aspects. Thus, do you have any advice on how to manage time in order to do research and perform well in your study at the same time?
Well, at the outset, I think I must mention that I do not claim expertise in any kind of program and you know, of any kind of research. I'm just an unworthy and an insignificant student who's trying to do his part in trying to contribute to the body of knowledge. I certainly do not consider myself suitable or worthy, you know, for any kind of kind words or praise, but nonetheless, I will welcome it as a means of motivation, as a means of inspiration for me to keep working. But I think, and I just want to touch on the point that was put forward by Saien when he mentioned that, and I think that it's quite important when students, because students who want to be involved in research, I find that they want immediate gratification, they want to see immediate results, they want that immediate satisfaction, they want to reap the reward, the fruits, the benefits of those efforts immediately. When it comes to research, it's a long-term process, and we even touched on this in the weekend in the panel discussion hosted by the Van Hills group as well. And I was simply trying to make the point that in research, it's a long-term journey. As I mentioned with Caprisa, 18 years of failure, 18 years of persistent failure, to the extent that they were receiving criticism, they were receiving all kinds of harsh criticism, you know, of this failure. And 18 years later was the breakthrough, the tenofovir study that reduces HIV transmission. So essentially, and I think you asked about the advice, you know, for students, etc. So if I may share this this kind of formula, if you like, my first meeting with Professor Abdul Karim, you know, it's tradition, it's culture that Caprisa, that he addresses the first year medical students every year, to invite them to be involved in Caprisa, to be involved in research. And in 2019, 29th of March, I won't ever forget the day, he comes to speak to the students, and you know, he opens by saying, if I were to see further, it's only because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. This is a quotation by Sir Isaac Newton, probably one of the greatest mathematicians, you know, the greatest physicists to have ever walked the face of the earth. And you'd know Professor Abdul Karim is a giant, both in the figurative and in the literal sense. Who better, you know, to be associating with, to be working under? And then when I go to his office, it was only meant to be a short meet and greet, but then we embarked on this long conversation for 20 minutes. And this formula, I call it CP3. It's an acronym. C stands for curiosity, P1 passion, P2 persistence, P3 perseverance. You'll find all these elements are linked to each other, because if you have an interest in science, you ought to be asking questions all the time. You ought to be curious, because science, that's how it works, by continuously asking questions, asking the relevant questions that seek to address some of the problems of the world, and in our case, the health-related issues. So curiosity being one. P1 is passion. You have to be passionate about everything you do. That passion to address those kinds of questions, the questions you asked when you are curious. You have to be passionate to search and find answers to those questions. P2, persistence. You have to be persistent in your efforts, because you'll find that you won't see success, you won't find the answer immediately. Do not allow failure, do not allow distraction, to derail you, to push you off track. So you have to be persistent. You need to search and find answers. P3 stands for perseverance. And for you to find answers to those questions you asked when you were curious, you have to keep pushing. If you persevere, you'll find answers even if they are not there. And I often speak about this, this formula, if you like, CP3, and I think it can be used both in your professional life but also in your personal life. If you are setting goals for you personally, for you professionally, in some way or the other, you will be using curiosity, passion, persistence, and perseverance. And I think ultimately, from the little that I can share with students, and I often do, speaking to high school students, in the last 3 years, I've been fortunate to be invited to schools, to be speaking either at the Matric Awards, to be speaking at the start of the academic year, of the calendar year, to give some kind of advice to the students. And I share this formula with the students, in that education is something so important. You have to prioritize your education, because what you work for, there's nobody that can take away from you. And I think from the little interaction I have, even with my elders, with my teachers, etc., that the biggest problem, or rather the biggest issue you can have, is regret. And you'll often find when you speak to the elders, your grandparents, your parents, they will say, I wish I could go back to school, because I will use that time so strategically. I will not waste that kind of time, and I will invest it in my education. And you do not want to end up 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I wish I could go back in time, and use my time wisely. So I often say education is a priority. And I think that, for the listeners, for the viewers, those who are students both in school but also early university, use your time strategically. Really, your education is something you work for. Your future is in your hands. You create your future. And when you have interest in education, I think ultimately success is the ultimate aim, the objective. And I think for the little advice that I can give, it would be on that end, it would be on that score, that keep pushing. Seek inspiration from your mentors. As my colleague has mentioned, when you start something, you'll probably not go to completion. You tend to lose interest. And you ought to continuously remind yourself why you started. You ought to continuously seek inspiration. We talk about the importance of mentorship. You need to have mentors in everything you do. If you want to go down a road of public public speaking, I want to speak publicly and to grow myself. Of course, you need to have a mentor. You need to have training. So in any field, you need to have training. You need to be trained by the right people whom you identify as the right people. So I think that with the little advice, that I can share, it would simply be those few points.
Students need to look at how they spend in their time in terms of their studies. I would like to emphasize they should prioritize their degree, and research should come secondary to their degree. So allocate more time to their studies, whether it be studying for medicine, nursing, whatever the degree they're in. And then research can come in as a secondary, where they can allocate whatever free time they have to research. I also recommend, when we go about our day, there's a lot of time that that I feel like social media and technology takes from our day. So look at how much time you spend on apps on your phone, and you realize that there is a lot of hours that you spend that could be used way more productively, whether it be through research, for example. Those hours you can put into research. So I say that would be my advice. And as Mohamed said, you don't want to leave university having regrets that you never take all your opportunities that were offered to you. Because once you leave university, you don't have access to as many resources, whether it be your mentors, etc., and access to courses. So on the point of courses, I would also recommend students to take as many courses as they can to upskill themselves, whether it be research skills, any day courses, workshops as well. If they find that they're lacking in a certain aspect of research, try and improve your skills, because all of that counts when you are writing up your CV. So my advice is upskill yourself, so that whatever courses you do, you add it to your CV, and all of that carries weight when you leave university and you start applying for jobs. And whatever courses you do, it's always going to be there on your record. And I feel like that's how students should be using their time, to benefit themselves, and if think about your future self looking back, and you say, I took all the opportunities that I had, and I'm proud of that. So yeah, that would be my advice.
From our guest speaker point of view, firstly, it is to prioritize your study, to balance out between studying and doing research. And secondly, like Mr. Mohamed has said, we should make clear goals and have strategic plans into making what we want to become the truth. And lastly, it is to allow time for what you do. Because in Vietnam, we have a saying that if you collect your fruit too soon, you will not taste the sweetness. Therefore, it is to be patient, to be consistent, to take our time, and to make the most out of what we have. I also see that many students, they want to optimize the time they have, and they try to be really hardworking, but then they ended up having burnout session, and then could not continue on what they do or completely collapse. Then do you have any sharing or any advice on this matter?
Of course, and it's so interesting that the quotation you just used, if you want to take the fruits early, you won't taste its sweetness. And I think that's something that should actually resonate with the students. You won't see your impact, the results immediately when you are interested in these kinds of endeavors. So in terms of the burnouts, I think that's a critical part in the life of a student, especially as a medical student. More particularly when they now in the working environment, you'll find that the long hours, whether you're on call, whether you are overwhelmed by the number of patients, by the ward work. And even when it comes to research activities, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of writing. It's a lot of analysis. But you'll find that you will not be working in isolation. You will always have a team with you. It's the teamwork. It's the collective wisdom, the collective efforts by your team that actually produce the end result and the end goal. And I find that when you work with a team of maybe 5 to 6 students, 5 to 6 colleagues, in that if one person finds it, to be too much, to be difficult, to the extent that they cannot cope, they should easily reach out to their colleague. Are you able to assist me? Are you able to fill in for me? If you need to attend to personal matters or to any other kind of initiative, of course your team is there to be supplementing, to be contributing for you. So I think it's important that when it comes to teamwork, we are cognizant that when you're part of a team, you are one and the same, because the downfall of one person is the downfall of that team. And the success of one person is the success of the entire team. You are one and the same. So it becomes important that you recognize that you're a team player, and that's probably an essential characteristic or trait of an individual. The personality of a person, you need to be a good team player. Tomorrow, if you go for a job interview, I can assure you one of the questions will be on that aspect. Are you a good team player? Are you a good communicator? How will you deal with challenges when they arise in a team? How will you communicate that? What solution can you bring, to your team? So when it comes to the burnout, when it comes to the mental health breakdown, we had actually seen an epidemic of mental health breakdowns, an epidemic of mental health challenges in the peak of COVID-19. With the lockdown, our healthcare workers, our interns, we had seen a rise, a spark, a spike, in the incidence, in the prevalence of depression, of mental health breakdowns. And as part of the initiatives, even at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where we come from, they had now embarked on an initiative for counseling. If you feel that you're having a breakdown, you're having a tough time, things are just too much, you need someone to talk to, you need to be counseled, these healthcare services, they need to be readily available. And also it's interesting you asked this question. I recall having a conversation sometime last year with one of the public health experts of the WHO, and this was, I believe, in Denmark, in Copenhagen. It was the European Congress of Infectious Diseases and Clinical Microbiology. And I was simply making the point, that when students enter the university, maybe at the start of every academic year, don't you think it's important to have mental health screening? When you enter the university, when you come to register as a student for that year, I'm a first year medical student, I'm a second year student, I'm a final year student, you ought to be screened, How are you doing in terms of mental health? Do you have breakdowns? Do you feel isolated? Do you feel depressed? Do you have any suicidal tendencies, any suicidal ideation? Have you attempted suicide before? And unfortunately, even, the institution we come from, in the last 2 years, unfortunately, we've had a few cases of suicide of medical students. And, I mean, I think that this epidemic of mental health issues, it should be addressed. It's been a priority by the World Health Organization, especially from COVID-19, from the lockdowns. And also we've seen that even in the home environment, when you keep people at home and confined to the walls of their house for so many hours, these issues then arise. And I think accordingly they have to be addressed. So I think you are raising a critical point when it comes to breakdowns, when it comes to mental health challenges. They have to be given the recognition and attention that they so deserve. And I mean, especially when it comes to the new healthcare workforce, when they're working for very long hours at the hospital, when they have to deal, you know, with so many patients, then the interpersonal conflicts that may arise. And I think part of the operational procedures of any institution, of a working environment, should speak to interpersonal conflict, should speak to these kinds of disagreement, you know, of conflicts. And I think ultimately, when you have these kinds of procedures in place to create a healthy working environment, you will inevitably deal with mental health as an issue. So I think, you know, in a nutshell, these kinds of solutions to mental health breakdowns, we ought to keep the discussion going, keep the dialogue going, bring in new ideas and innovative ideas, you know, team building activities with your colleagues. When you are suffering a mental health breakdown, they will be there to support you. Seek advice from your elders. Seek advice from your parents, because as a young person, when you experience this kind of challenge, you ought to initiate a discussion, a conversation, because every problem has a solution. That solution can only be found in discussion and dialogue. So I think in essence, that's the little that I can share.
Yeah, no, burnout is a real issue nowadays with our students, especially in medicine. But I think you need to, my advice would be to prevent burnout would be to find a balance between studies and your what you're interested in, like your downtime, your free time, what you find joy in, whether it be extracurricular activities, going out with your friends. So identify that and you know, do it maybe once or twice a week, so that you have a balance. You know, you're not always working, you're not always in the books. You need to find time to treat yourself, look after yourself, your mental health, as Mohamed has mentioned. And also my advice would be to, you know, if identify what is causing your stress or your mental health to not be in a positive state. So whether it be your social media, whether it be the people you are surrounding yourself with. So you need to look at all of that, and that which is not benefiting you in a positive way, you know, what's the point in continuing exposing yourself to that? So whether it be social media, people that are not benefiting you or having a negative impact on you, there's no point, you know. So my advice, I mean, I'll give you my example. Since I've reduced my social media usage, I mean, I've never felt more free, like I've never felt more happy. So I feel like social media has a lot of negative impact. Obviously not all of it, but each individual is different. So that would be my advice. Yeah, so also support, we can't, support from your friends, your family, it's so important. And I've been lucky enough, you know, to have great friends and strong family support throughout my studies. And yeah, I know some people, you know, it can get very lonely. They don't have friends or family support, you know. But I think within themselves, they need to find, you know, strength as well, whether it be you know, religious in God, or, you know, find where you can draw strength, something where you can draw strength from. And yeah, just keep going, you know, don't give up on your dreams. I know burnout is very common now. Even like if you cannot handle burnout, you need to be able to handle burnout in your studies while studying in university, because after university you're going to start your work. In your working environment, there's also going to be, you're going to experience burnout as well. So it's not like burnout is only while you're studying. that's also why you work in. So I feel like, you know, the earlier you adapt and to being able to handle burnout, you know, the easier it becomes later on as you progress through life. Yeah, so there's always going to be challenges throughout your life. It's just, you know, you take it with your stride and you grow from those experiences and you become stronger. So that would be my advice.
So I can see myself resonate with Mr. Saien's sharing about social media, because a lot of people here, we see that they go on social media and they see many, you know, faces of people who like high achievers, and they feel like the fear of missing out. They feel that like they are not adequate, they're not sufficient, and as well we should think that and always be reminded that we are not alone. We have our teammates around us. We can always seek for help. Do not like hesitate from seeking for help if you really need it. And lastly, I think it requires a systemic approach to stress and burnout, especially of healthcare students. And as well as limited time, students also like adequate funding for their research projects. Could you share your experience in seeking the funds for your project?
Yeah. Well, the issue of the funding, you know, is also an important one, because that simply speaks to the resources for you to embark on that kind of initiative. And if you don't have the funds, you can't start. If you can't start, you cannot get the ball rolling. And of course, inevitably, it's going to lead to failure. There will be no outcome. There's no objective, essentially. So I think in terms of the research funding, this should be approached through the institution. I don't think any kind of researcher, any kind of scholar will personally use funds to finance that kind of project, because as you do this kind of research, these projects, it's not for personal fulfillment. It's not for personal gratification. You are improving a system. You are contributing to a body of knowledge that is going to help, that is going to assist, that is going to better the lives of people in your community, your country, your continent, or the world at large, if the impact of your work is able to reach that kind of level. So I don't think funds, by no means, they should not be personally, they should not come from your personal pocket. It should come from an institution, an organization. I think where students are concerned, where early career researchers, your affiliation, in our case, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, whom we represent. These kinds of institutions can be approached. The South African, the Medical Research Council, and other bodies, other institutions, whereby you need funding, you then pitch your proposal, you put forward your proposal, your idea, your initiative, you communicate it to them, and if you meet the criteria, if you are accepted, of course, you are allocated funds for that kind of project. So essentially, I think I would advise, the insight that I have is that you must approach your institution. There are mechanisms in place, there are procedures, there are channels, you know, for funding these kinds of initiatives. And if you work with your supervisor, I think as a research, as an established researcher, you have what we call a cost center, whereby research funds are put into that kind of center. Essentially, it's a pool of funds that you put together, and when these projects come about, then you take funds from that. And I can give an example to you. 2021, 2022, I was working on a research project with the medical school dean, that we were looking at trichoscopy, which is a simple procedure to scan the hair, the scalp of the participants. And each participant, we were incentivizing that if you participate, you will get a box of pizza and a Coke, which is essentially a meal. Now, who's going to finance that meal? You know, so those kinds of funds come from these established, you know, pools of funding, the cost center, that will ultimately finance the logistics, you know, the transportation costs, the on the ground expenses to hire the venue, to be setting up the venue, to get staff, you know, to come in to help with the setup, to help with the coordination, the logistics, the funding for the food. So all of this must come from your affiliation, the institution you represent, because you'll find that the end product, when your research is published, that institution gains the recognition. They gain the, how can you say, it's the research reward in terms of ranking. You know, in the country we come from, the institution we represent is one of the best in the country. I believe 2 to 3 years ago, when the rankings were released, University of KwaZulu-Natal was top, meaning first in terms of research output.
Yeah.
And I mean, ultimately, these projects, which, I mean, they go into the millions of rands, into the millions of dollars. And of course, there are external donors, one being the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, doing tremendous work on the African continent. And we're talking about billions of dollars every year being rendered specifically for research, for advancement. That's just one organization. Then you get the Wellcome Trust, which I believe is in the UK, also doing fantastic work, you know, grant applications. And I think insofar as a medical student, an early career researcher, you should be trained in grant proposal. How do you write an application seeking for grant? How do you write an application requesting for money? I think, you know, it's so important that you ask this question, because probably as part of our recommendations to the university is to include in the curriculum a component that will teach medical students how to draw up a grant application. And I think we should actually be making a note of that. That will form part of recommendation, is to be teaching the students how to do the write-up, how to do a proposal write-up. So I thank you for that question. You know, it's a suggestion that we should include it in the curriculum, teaching our students. But I think ultimately that the long and short of it is that you do not personally finance your initiatives. In as much as they grow you personally, they develop you personally, the bigger picture is the professional growth and development. The professional prosperity that you bring to your institution, to your affiliation, that is what ultimately matters.
Also, you need to speak to your supervisor, you know, because they'll have access to a cost center, as he mentioned. And from our experience, our nurses and vaccine study, when we were submitting for publishing, they did require money, you know, payment just to be published. So, and our supervisors had access to the cost center, and they covered the cost. So you need to find out from your supervisor, even before you start the study, you know, find out will funding be needed for your specific study, because some studies, for example, a survey won't need much funding. But however, other studies, if you're doing a lot of lab work, you need access to resources, and that all will require funding. So in that sense, if you're still starting out as a researcher, from my experience, I was directed away from lab research and to more your survey type of research, because it doesn't require a lot of cost. So that would be my advice in terms of funding.
So I think about funding, it is firstly to ask your institutions for the funding, for the money, and you can find your potential investors, like who would be interested in your topic, who would gain benefits from this. Or you may just watch more Shark Tank because you will have to pitch and to, grant proposals for your research. And also make sure to talk to your supervisors about this, because they will know who will be holding the money, where is the sources. And lastly, it is to maybe ask some business management student to count your finance to make a plan that would be like most effective for the money you will be using. So your answers have delivered a lot of advice, which is of immense value to students who want to start working on their research or is already on their way. So in general, what is the biggest thing you would like people to take away from your stories?
For me, the biggest thing I would say, CP3, CP cubed. I think if you can fully appreciate and understand and comprehend the different aspects of being curious, being curious, being passionate, being persistent, and to persevere in everything you do, I think ultimately your aim and objective will be fulfilled, it will be attained. But and I'm just reminded now of a quotation by my former teacher, my former lecturer, Professor Peter Owira, who interestingly taught us pharmacology. And he said something so profound, and till this date I remember this quotation. He said, and I quote, "The university is not a place for teaching, neither is it a place for learning. Rather, it is a place for the acquisition, regeneration, and dissemination of knowledge." So truly profound that, if you were to analyze this quotation, you do not just come to the university to get content from your lecturer, to get content from the PowerPoint and simply regurgitate that into your test, your assessment, to simply achieve a scoring, a result that's going to award you your degree. The university is an environment that teaches you about life, about how you apply the maturity, the mindset that you apply. So I think perhaps the single most significant advice I can afford to the students is that when you apply CP3, be equally cognizant of this opportunity you have. Where we come from, to be accepted into the university is a privilege. It is an honor, that it is so highly competitive for a spot at university, especially for the medical program. Just last week, we received news that the University of KwaZulu-Natal received over 124,000 applications for only 9,000 seats. One can imagine how highly competitive, in that for every 10 students are fighting for one spot. So you can see how competitive it is, and you ought to appreciate it, really. When you accepted into that program that you have applied for, you must recognize, you must appreciate, you must excel in it, because you are holding back. If you do not excel, you are holding back on a spot, you are holding back on resources that could have been used otherwise. So I think that this advice ought to really, we should take home this advice that yes, it will be CP3, the curiosity, the passion, persistence, and perseverance, but ultimately appreciate and be grateful for that honor, that privilege that you have of education. And of course, to be respectful to your parents, to your elders. I certainly, hope to be the person that they would like for me to be. I'm grateful to my parents, they do everything for me. And to appreciate, to love your elders, to be deriving benefit and knowledge from them, it's a lifelong journey. It's not simply something that will be done in a few years, it's lifelong. So the biggest advice I would say, yes, and further, approach your mentors, approach your elders as and when you you encounter challenges. And I think essentially this is the theme of the discussion that we're having, is that how do you inspire, how do you motivate, how do you spark interest in the youth, in the medical students, you know, to achieve your full potential. You have unlimited potential. Do not let that go to waste. And I think, the world is full of opportunities for you to, you know, there are so many doors for you to knock onto and for you to open. And behind each door, there's 10 more doors. And of course, more doors of opportunities that will present themselves. So, you know, if you have the right mindset, if you employ the right mindset, going into any type of education or an institution, and being passionate about it, I think ultimately you will meet your aims and your objectives.
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway I think from my journey would be, is to take every opportunity that presents itself to you, as Mohamed has said. Research has given me the opportunity to go overseas. I'm here because of research, and I would have never, thought that research would have gotten me this far. So I would say, just keep going, keep focused on your journey, your goals, and if I can do it, like I'm not. There's nothing like super special about me. I'm an average person, but you keep working hard, and you'll find the fruits of your hard work eventually pay. You'll reap the rewards of your hard work. So that's the reason I'm here today. Experiencing another different country, and I'm so grateful, to have the opportunity. But yeah, so take every opportunity that comes your way. Don't forget where you come from, as Mohamed has said, your family, all those people that support you, make you a better person. Stay true to your roots. Never forget where you come from. And so that would be my takeaway from my journey. Yeah.
I believe that everyone here have taken themselves some advice, some lessons home, and for me it would be make the full list of your opportunities as well as your potentials. So from the sharing from our two international companions today, we have spotlight on many aspects of research that students would like to hear about and would like to have more insight into. Once again, thank you a lot for sitting here with us today and give us your valuable input in the podcast. The audiences, if you have any questions for our guest speakers or for Vinny Research Club, please do not hesitate to contact us through our Facebook or another channels. Thank you and see you again.